Hello everyone, I'm Jimmy Moore. We're going to go over Leverage Leadership Chapter 1 for Data-Driven Instruction and Chapter 2, Observation and Feedback. This presentation is created by myself, Cynthia Velasquez, and Ashley Estes. Our overview for our presentation, Chapter 1 over Data-Driven Instruction. This first chapter focuses on 4 fundamental keys to data-driven instruction. Those 4 keys are assessment, analysis, action, and systems, while Chapter 2 focuses on scheduled observation, key action steps, and effective feedback. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 documents are both posted on the discussion board. You may print those out as you choose to. You can click on them, open them up, and follow through whenever you need them. Here's a brief list of what is for Chapter 1. The Chapter 2 documents are going to be listed in the Chapter 2 section of this presentation. Your Chapter 1 vocabulary that we want you to be familiar with is data-driven, one of the fundamental foundations of a school's success. Data-driven instruction involves gathering together a database of information about the students in each classroom and using that information to improve the quality of teaching in the classroom. Assessment defines the roadmap for vigor. Analysis determines where students are struggling and why. Action implements new teaching plans to respond to this analysis, and systems create systems and procedures to ensure constant data improvement. Your keys to data-driven instruction are assessment. It's more than just the state and national standards. We want to use it as the roadmap for learning. Analysis. We have to get to the root problem and create clear and intuitive reports. Also, we need to model how to analyze the data. Action. The translation from the results into changes in classrooms, systems. An adequate set of systems ties everything together, creating campus calendar aligned with assessments, results, and reteaching allows teams to lock in that data-driven instruction. So what tools from Leverage Leadership, or if you're like me, you're using Leverage Leadership 2.0, will you use to develop data-driven instruction at your school? And what are your next steps for launching data-driven instruction? Chapter 2 goals. Observe teachers and give feedback effectively, and improve the development of all teachers in every phase of their development, particularly in the first month of school. Again, your Chapter 2 documents are going to be listed on the discussion board. Here's a list of the 3 of them. They're in Word format. The vocabulary we want you to be familiar with are scheduled observations, which are frequent and regular observations. Key action steps, identifying the 1 or 2 most important areas for that teacher to grow. Effective feedback, give direct face-to-face feedback that practices specific action steps for improvement. And direct accountability, create systems to ensure feedback translates to practice. Our first core idea, the real purpose of observation and feedback is not to evaluate a teacher, but to develop them. So with our t-tests, we are developing teachers, we're coaching teachers, okay? They call it an evaluation, but we're really not evaluating. We're developing you guys, and we're coaching you. Another core idea, the fastest way to grow or develop a skill: see it, name it, do it, and then repeat. See it, name it, do it, repeat. So you're probably wondering why there's see it, name it, do it. Well, see it, name it, do it has replaced the 6 steps of effective feedback. So we're going to connect those. So you have praise and probe, which is now see it. We want you to see the success, see the model, and see the gap. Action steps are now name it, take the action step and punch it. And practice, plan, and follow-up are now do it. And then we want you to perfect your plan, practice it, and follow up. So see it, name it, do it. Those have replaced the 6 steps. Why the change? Well, Paul Bambrick-Santoyo says that they discovered that the 6 steps were way too complex, didn't provide enough guidance to give effective feedback. Especially for the probe step, it left many of the meetings off track, and it was hard to determine what made effective questions. They also noticed that planning was more effective when done before the practice, because planning made the practice more relevant and perfected the practice. So for those of you who are listening and watching this, here's what has happened. In leverage leadership, you had the chapters were in order for data-driven instruction, and then the observation and feedback, and then planning. But in leverage leadership 2.0, in the newer version, they just flip-flopped the observation and feedback and the planning. So planning is actually chapter 2, observation and feedback is chapter 3. Great, so you observed, now where do you focus? Let's take a look at some action steps, some examples of those. Before we do that though, let's take a look at what Paul Bambrick-Santoyo has, what he has accomplished and what he really wants us to accomplish here. So he studied effective school leaders across the country. These leaders have developed teachers, particularly new teacher, the fastest. Now he's noticed a pattern in the types of action steps that they have given to the teachers. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the action step examples here. Okay, I want you to look at the characteristics that these action steps have in common. So go ahead and pull out your scope and sequence for your Get Better Faster scope and sequence. You'll see that it is broken down into a management column and a rigor column. Okay, each one of them have action steps. So for the action step for management, this is an example. Deliberately scan the room for compliance. Stand at the corner of the room so that you can see all the students. Choose 3 or 4 hot spots to scan constantly and be seen looking around. Make sure you're looking. Action steps for rigor. Use universal prompts in response to student's error. Roll back incorrect responses to student using a neutral tone. Ask 2 to 3 students to agree or disagree with student's response. And 3, stamp that correct answer. So the core idea here is you give your teachers a smaller, more precise action step, the quicker they're going to grow. And the most effective coaches narrow their focus to the highest leverage of action step and absolutely nothing more. So again, we want to look at our scope and sequence for Get Better Faster. Note that the rigor and the management are side by side, and you cannot wait for learning to happen. You cannot wait for learning to be happening. So, your highest leverage, will this help the teacher develop most quickly and effectively? And is it connected to a larger professional development goal? How do you measure it? Your action step is what you can practice. It names the what and the how. And it's also bite-sized. So if you can't make the change in a week, the action step isn't small enough. You need to go back and rethink your action step if it's not something that your teacher can change in a week. Converting those goals into action steps. So when our action steps are too high, to be an action step like keeping the students on task or monitoring students to prevent off-task behavior, we should really look at those, taking those action steps, remember breaking them down into smaller bite-sized action steps, like deliberately scanning the room for compliance, standing at the corner of the room so you can see all the students, choosing 3 or 4 hotspots to scan constantly, and to be seen looking around that room. Again, another one for the rigor side, the supporting students when they get a wrong answer, that's way too high. And again, ask them additional questions is still a little bit too high. So we want to break that down to a universal prompts in response to student error. Roll back the incorrect response to student using a neutral tone. Ask 2 or 3 students to agree or disagree with student's response, and stamp that answer in. Make sure they have it. Make sure they've mastered it. The core idea here is to write down the action step because it builds that roadmap for effective feedback. When we aren't clear where we're headed, teachers aren't going to be either. So if we don't have a clear idea of where we're going and what goals we're wanting to meet, then our teachers, they're not going to have a clear idea of what the goals that they need to go so that we can all get there together are either. Case study number 1. Go ahead and use the case study number 1 script for this. This is just kind of the framework. And also get out your Get Better Faster scope and sequence and go through this framework right here. After you've looked at that, we have another core idea. When picking an action step, think waterfall. Start from the top and stop when you hit the first major growth area. Alright, so let's take a look at give crisp action steps to what to do, followed by one word or word by word what to do directions for each turn and talk. Ask 1 or 2 check for understanding questions that you will ask the class prior to starting the turn and talk, and scan after each direction and narrate at least 2 students complying. So after we've done this, what key takeaways do you have when you compare your action step to the shared action step? Because remember that waterfall is cumulative. All we're doing is we just keep integrating former action steps into the current action step to keep up mastery. Once we've mastered that first one, we're just going to go to the next growth level. Okay, that waterfall just keeps building. Okay, but it stops at each growth step. Alright, so now we're going to take a closer look at one of the key action areas for phase 2 on the Get Better Faster scope and sequence for aggressive monitoring. To see the power of aggressive monitoring, we're going to watch a video of Julia Goldenheim. She's a 7th grade English language arts teacher in North Star, or at North Star, up in Newark, New Jersey. Julia's going to be monitoring a student writing assignments. While we're watching this video, I want us to think about the 2 questions that are posed here. What does Julia do to maximize the effectiveness of the student's independent practice? And what did she have to prepare ahead of time to be able to do this? So the video on the next slide should start automatically. If it doesn't, after a few seconds you might have to push play.
You have 2 really short passages to read. They're more like little paragraphs and a prompt at the bottom. You're going to plan on the back. So it mostly just looks like a blank piece of paper, but that's where your plan is going to go. It's a little bit of outline practice. You have 12 minutes to do this. Begin. And I'm coming around first looking for those full headings. Add it out to Jason for his urgency. Don't forget the active reading. The passages are short, but you should still do that. And I'm coming around now checking for your author's purpose note. I'll check it off if it's correct. I'll put a dot if it's not. Don't forget that note. An author's purpose note should start with a verb. The author is trying to do what? It could be to inform, to persuade, any of those things. Just make sure it starts with a verb. You have 7 minutes remaining. You want to be getting to the outline within the next minute. And now that I'm seeing people getting to the outline, I'm coming around checking your thesis statement. Don't forget to put quotes around the titles of the articles, but then you got it. So this is asking you to compare the key information. I don't think the key information in the second one is polar bears. I think that's a detail. So what is the key idea presented in that second article? The first part of your thesis is excellent. Just fix that part. Nice, Maya. I like saying how they show the information. Nice job. You have 5 minutes to complete your outlines. I see strong theses. Now I'm looking for strong evidence. AJ's doing a really nice job of writing his evidence in shorthand. Paragraph 4, sentence 2. Doesn't take a super long time. Yanea did the same thing, just a key word from the quote.
All right, so basically what we have here is you can't correct what you don't detect. Okay, and you're not going to be able to detect if it's right or wrong if you're not aggressively monitoring your students. So when we look at our highest achieving teachers, what separates them is less than what they do in discourse and more what they do during independent practice. So now that we've looked at picking the right action step, it's time to consider how to deliver that feedback effectively. We're going to watch a complete feedback meeting and focus around aggressive monitoring. You're going to see Principal Ashley Anderson, who's the principal at Uncommon Collegiate High School in Brooklyn, New York, as she meets with a second-year teacher who has had success in the past, and she's now working on developing her skill in aggressive monitoring, gathering data during independent practice in order to respond to student error. So while we're watching this next clip, think about these next 2 questions. How does Ashley launch her feedback meeting, and what are all the steps she takes in guiding her teacher? So let's take a look at this video.
Over the past few weeks before spring break, we've been focusing on direct instruction. Today, when I was in your class, it was great to see before students jumped into practice, you asking one conceptual and one procedural question prior to the independent practice. What was the impact of that on their practice?
Well, specifically when it came down to the conceptual question, getting them to stamp that their own like self-check and understanding that 0 should equal 0 if you solve for the correct x was like great self-check method for them.
I noticed that as well. There were less hands during that time. Students had, which led to students having a more sustained practice time. So great job. It's really good to see. So now that we've set students up to successfully tackle the IP, I want us to start to think about what we do, how we use data during independent practice. Okay. So specifically today, I want to focus on aggressive monitoring. Okay. Think back to our last PD before break. What are the keys to aggressive monitoring?
I would say that the main focus would be to collect data, like in the moment data, just to get a feel of like, I think where your class is at. What else? I feel like that's like the main focus for AGMO.
Great to hear. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to push your thinking a little bit, and I'm going to show you a video of Mr. Frazier's class during his practice. And I want you to think about what is Mr. Frazier saying and doing to ensure that student papers look like his exemplar, and what impact does this have? Let's write that question down. Let's watch. What did you notice?
Okay, so I have a couple of things. He announced before they started, I'm going to be checking for certain things.
Okay.
And then he said, the first thing I'm going to be looking for is amplitude midline. He announced that there won't be any hands during that first round for students to refer to their notes. He was physically collecting data on his clipboard per round, I think. And then for his next round, he like announced what he was looking for the next time. So first time it was amplitude and midline, and the second time he was looking for range.
What do we call that?
Laps?
Name and the last.
Yeah.
And what was he doing with student papers?
He was physically coding them. So like, as he was going around per round, I don't know what the actual codes were, but he was either checking and circling, but each round he knew what he was looking for and was like, okay, yes, this is right, or no, go back.
What impact do you think this had on student learning?
Well, it's definitely something that I need to work on, which is the actual physical collection of data. It allows kids to kind of have like a flow of the thought process out loud of what their work should look like, which is the exemplar.
Absolutely. So thinking about your own practice, you just mentioned a little bit of this. So when you think back to your independent practice today, what is the biggest gap between your practice and what you did today and what you just saw Mr. Frazier do?
I think my two biggest areas of concern, or two biggest areas of growth, would definitely be a code per round and then what I'm looking for per round.
Okay. And what should you do with that code while you're walking around?
Marking on kids' papers.
Marking on kids' papers. And in order for you to think through that code, what should you have prior to?
An exemplar. So if I'm looking at the exemplar, then I should know exactly what my round should be.
Over the past few weeks before spring break, we've been focusing on direct instruction. Today, when I was in your class, it was great to see before students jumped into practice, you asking one conceptual and one procedural question prior to the independent practice. What was the impact of that on their practice?
Well, specifically when it came down to the conceptual question, getting them to stamp that their own like self-check and understanding that 0 should equal 0 if you solve for the correct x was like great self-check method for them.
I noticed that as well. There were less hands during that time. which led to students having a more sustained practice time. So great job.
Thank you.
It's really good to see. So now that we've set students up to successfully tackle the IP, I want us to start to think about what we do, how we use data during independent practice.
Okay.
Okay. So specifically today, I want to focus on aggressive monitoring.
Okay.
Think back to our last PD before break. What are the keys to aggressive monitoring?
I would say that the main focus would be to collect data, like in the moment data, just to get a feel of like, I think where your class is at. What else? I feel like that's like the main focus for AGMO.
Great to hear. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to push your thinking a little bit, and I'm going to show you a video of Mr. Frazier's class during his practice.
Okay.
And I want you to think about what is Mr. Frazier saying and doing to ensure that student papers look like his exemplar, and what impact does this have? Let's write that question down.
Okay.
Let's watch. What'd you notice?
Okay, so I have a couple of things. He announced before they started, I'm going to be checking for certain things.
Okay.
And then he said, the first thing I'm going to be looking for is amplitude and midline. He announced that there won't be any hands during that first round for students to refer to their notes. He was physically collecting data on his clipboard per round, I think. And then for his next round, he like announced what he was looking for the next time. So first time it was amplitude and midline, and the second time he was looking for range.
What do we call that?
Laps?
Name the
PD,
labs.
yeah.
And what was he doing with student papers?
He was physically coding them. So like, as he was going around per round, I don't know what the actual codes were, but he was either checking and circling, but each round he knew what he was looking for and was like, okay, yes, this is right, or no, go back.
What impact do you think this had on student learning?
Well, it's definitely something that I need to work on, which is the actual physical collection of data.
Okay.
It allows kids to kind of have like a flow of a thought process out loud of what their work should look like, which is the exemplar.
Absolutely. So thinking about your own practice, you just mentioned a little bit of this. So when you think back to your independent practice today, what is the biggest gap between your practice and what you did today and what you just saw Mr. Frazier do?
I think my two biggest areas of concern, or two biggest areas of growth, would definitely be a code per round and then what I'm looking for per round.
Okay. And what should you do with that code while you're walking around?
Marking it on kids' papers.
Marking on kids' paper.
Yeah.
And in order for you to think through that code, what should you have prior to?
An exemplar. So if I'm looking at the exemplar, then I should know exactly what my round should be.
All right, so leads us to our next core value or core idea. If you want a teacher to get it, you get them to see it. See it is to believe it. So now we're going to continue with our meeting with Ashley. And we're going to take a look at her next video. On the next part of it, Ashley's feedback meeting, I want you to look at what does Ashley say and do to ensure her teacher knows the action step.
So let's put all this together because you just really identified the gap here. And I want you to tell me, what is your action step this week?
Me? Okay. My action step, I believe, is to create rounds for my I do, and to create a code for each of those rounds, which I will use to collect in the moment data.
Pretty close.
Oh.
Write this down.
Okay.
Your action step for this week is to aggressively monitor through one procedural and one conceptual lap during independent practice. And you name the how you're going to do that. First, you're going to name the lap and code. Second, mark every paper with pen and exemplar hand. And this will better allow you to, 3, collect data on the trends for each lab.
All right, so that leads us to, you don't lock in the learning until you stamp it, okay? And this is what Ashley has finally got her teacher to understand. She's locking in that learning, now she's got to stamp it in. Transformative action step, name the what and the how. Okay, transformative action steps, name the what and the how. All right, so let's find out how Ashley's going to tie this in and wrap this up here. So, how does Ashley ensure that her teacher is going to have a successful practice? Let's check out this video.
Let's jump into some planning. So open up your lesson plan. And what I have sent you in your email is a chart that I want you to include in your lesson plan. And so what it has is column 1. I want you to start to identify what are the keys to an ideal answer. Think through the names for each of those labs and the code for those. So take 3 minutes to fill in that chart, and I've created a chart myself, and we'll spar with what we both got. Okay, take 3 minutes. All right, talk me through what you got.
Okay, so I essentially have about 3 or 4 boxes. I kind of condensed them into 3. So the first step was, the name was, I'm looking for your completed square. So my ideal answer is to have all 4 completed boxes correct, including the signage in each. My code, I feel like it should be really simple for this. It's just going to be a circle and a check.
Okay. Take a look at it.
Oh, you got 3 boxes too. Okay.
So yes, I also looked at 3 keys for the ideal answer. What are your key takeaways?
I like how you have questions to ask in terms of the code, so it's not just circle for incorrect or box, but if my kids do have it incorrect, what is that prompting question? I like that a lot.
Yep.
Did you balance, I'm saying balancing on both sides, did you use the additive property for your equation? I like that language.
Take 1 minute to revise yours.
Alright, so she has to perfect the plan before she can practice it, because you cannot practice well unless you know what you're looking for. This kind of goes back to why Paul Bamber-Santoyo moved planning ahead of observation and evaluation or feedback. So this is one of the reasons why right here. Alright, so let's see how she wraps this up. Alright, so what final steps does Ashley take to get her teacher to master the action step?
Okay, great. So now that we have a plan, we're going to jump into practice. And what I have around the room are your independent practice from today. And you are going to monitor using your lesson plan.
Okay.
All right, so talk me through, what are you looking for?
So I'm doing 4 laps, and I am doing my first lap, which is completing the square.
And how do students know?
I'm going to be circling if it's incorrect, highlighting if it's looking, to check if it's correct, if it's move on.
And How are you collecting data? Tick marks per lab. Tick marks where? On my exemplar. You ready? Yeah. Let's go. As I'm coming around, I'm now looking at your perfect square trinomial. How did you create your perfect square trinomial? Pause. What are you going to do? Your code. That's all I'm going to do? Mm-hmm. Okay. As I'm coming around, I'm looking for your perfect square trinomial. If I circle it, that is where you should be focusing on. If I check it, move on to the next problem. As I'm coming around, I'm also focusing on if you have the correct signage in your boxes. Good. Good. What are you saying so far? Okay, so what I'm noticing is that people are just skipping this step. So they're adding 16 on both sides, but they're not simplifying, and then it messes them up when they have to actually solve for x minus square root. So they're missing this second step this third step of the perfect square trinomial. Yeah, that's exactly what I got. Okay, perfect. How did that feel? Good. I like it a lot because now, especially for the perfect square trinomial, I know exactly where on the example I'm looking at and where on the paper I'm looking at. So that was good. Good. Let's sit down. You just finished your practice. How did that align to what we named in our exemplar? Well, first and foremost, each round was very clear and concise, so we wanted to make sure that we had a name and a lab for each code. And I think that was great for me. Also, I had the exemplar in, and that was great for me to refer back to. And I collected data on trends for every lab. So I think, hopefully that aligned to our exemplar. It did. Great job. Usually I ask you what's the best time, and I'm coming next year to see this. So that's super exciting. I'd also like to see the exact chart that we used today, in your lesson plans from now on. So if you could just keep that in there and reuse that would be great. And then before we close out today, restate for me your action step for this week. Okay. So my action step is to aggressively monitor one procedural and one conceptual lab by naming each lab in code, marking every paper with the exemplar in hand, and to collect data on trends per lab. Nice job. Nice job today.
All right, so that brings us to the end. And our final core idea is to perfect practice makes perfect. Meet the teacher at the point of error. I can't really say anything negative about that because, we just watched this whole thing, this whole process of how this works and how it should work. You have to practice it to be perfect. Okay? Nobody's perfect. Nobody's a perfect teacher. These sports guys, they're not perfect, but they put in a lot of practice. So, if we meet the teacher at the point of error, then they are going to understand what they need to practice, and then they can practice it until they get it perfect. So our Chapter 2 questions. How frequently are your teachers being observed? How many times a year or how many times a month? And which of the see it, name it, do it steps of effective feedback are being used to give teachers feedback? And then which of the see it, name it, do it would most enhance the quality of your school's or your own personal feedback? Think about those as we close. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Hope your summer is great and your next semester and your future endeavors are awesome. Have a good day.